Why doesn't anyone make seven-cylinder cars? Have you ever stopped and wondered why car engines come in almost every number of cylinders except seven? You've got three-cylinder city cars, four cylinders everywhere, five-cylinder Audis that sound absolutely insane, smooth inline sixes, V8 muscle cars, V10 supercars, even V12 luxury monsters. But a seven-cylinder? It's basically non-existent. It's one of those random questions that sounds like a joke until you actually think about it. If manufacturers can build engines with five cylinders, why not seven? Is there some law of physics stopping them? Or did the entire car industry just collectively decide, nah, seven isn't it? Well, it turns out there's a pretty good reason, and it's got everything to do with engineering, cost, and whether the benefits are actually worth the headache. First, let's talk about why engines even have different numbers of cylinders in the first place. More cylinders generally mean smoother power delivery because instead of having one or two pistons doing all the workload gets spread across several cylinders firing one after another. That means less vibration, a smoother driving experience, and usually the ability to rev higher. But more cylinders also mean more moving parts, more weight, more friction, and more money to build. So, manufacturers are always trying to find the sweet spot between performance, efficiency, and cost. That's why four-cylinder engines dominate the market. They're cheap, compact, reliable, and modern turbochargers mean they can produce surprisingly big power. Then you move up to six cylinders if you want smoother operation and more performance. After that, V8s become the choice for serious power, and anything above that is mostly for luxury or exotic cars where cost isn't the biggest concern. Now here's where things get interesting. Odd-numbered engines already exist. Three-cylinder engines are everywhere now because they're incredibly efficient, and with modern balancing systems, they're surprisingly smooth. Five-cylinder engines are much rarer, but manufacturers like Audi and Volvo proved they can work brilliantly. The famous Audi 2.5-liter turbo five-cylinder has become legendary because it combines compact size with a sound that honestly doesn't sound like anything else on the road. It almost has this weird mix of an inline-six and a V8, and that's part of why enthusiasts love it. So if three and five cylinders work, surely seven should too. Right? Well, not exactly. The biggest problem is balance. Engines create vibrations every time a piston changes direction, and engineers spend countless hours trying to cancel those vibrations out. Inline-six engines are famous because they're naturally balanced. Everything cancels itself out perfectly, making them incredibly smooth without needing complicated balancing shafts. Four-cylinder engines aren't perfect, but they're simple enough that manufacturers accept the trade-off or use balance shafts to reduce vibration. A seven-cylinder engine sits in a really awkward middle ground. It's longer than an inline-six, making packaging under the hood a nightmare, but it doesn't have the perfect natural balance of an inline-six. In fact, it introduces new vibration issues that engineers would have to solve using additional counterweights or balancing systems. Suddenly, you've got an engine that's more complicated, more expensive, and not actually smoother than the engine you already had. Think of it like building a bridge. You could make a seven-sided bridge if you wanted, but if a six-sided design is stronger, cheaper, and easier to build, why would you intentionally choose the more complicated option? Packaging is another huge issue. Modern cars are designed around engine sizes that manufacturers already know work. An inline-seven would simply be too long for most vehicles. Even fitting modern inline-six engines into today's cars is becoming difficult because crash regulations require larger crumple zones at the front. Add another cylinder, and suddenly the engine becomes even longer, forcing designers to redesign the entire front end of the car. Okay, so what about making a V7 instead? That sounds like a clever workaround until you realize it creates an even bigger problem. V engines work best when each bank has an equal number of cylinders. A V6 has three cylinders on each side. A V8 has four on each side. A V10 has five and five. But a V7 would have four cylinders on one side and three on the other. That completely ruins the symmetry. The firing order becomes much more complicated, balancing gets significantly harder, and the crankshaft design becomes an engineering nightmare. At that point, Manufacturers usually just add one more cylinder and build a V8 instead because it's smoother, easier to engineer, and customers already love V8s. There's also the question of performance. What exactly would a 7-cylinder engine achieve that existing engines can't? If you want better fuel economy than a V8, manufacturers already have turbocharged 6-cylinder engines. If you want more power than a 6-cylinder, a V8 is already the obvious solution. A 7-cylinder doesn't really fill any missing gap in the market. It's not dramatically more efficient, it's not dramatically more powerful, and it's definitely not cheaper. This is one of the biggest reasons it never caught on. The automotive industry doesn't just build things because they're possible. They build things because there's a business case. Every new engine costs hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, to develop. Manufacturers have to design new engine blocks, new crankshafts, new software, new manufacturing equipment, and then prove the engine is reliable enough to survive hundreds of thousands of miles. If customers aren't asking for a 7-cylinder engine, that investment simply doesn't make sense. Now, before the comment section goes crazy saying, actually, there have been a few 7-cylinder engines throughout history, but almost none of them were designed for passenger cars. Some marine engines have used 7-cylinder. But here's a question I'll leave you with. If money and engineering weren't a problem, would you actually buy a 7-cylinder car? Imagine pulling up to a car meet and someone asks, "What engine's in it?" And you just casually say, "It's got 7 cylinders." Half the people would probably think you're joking. Maybe there's a reason no one seriously tried it. Or maybe there's a hidden gem the industry never explored. Either way, it's one of those weird automotive mysteries that makes you appreciate just how much thought goes into every engine under the hood.